Hi! Today we are going to talk about trail braking and braking mid-corner in general. For street riding, what are the benefits of these techniques, what are the drawbacks, how to do it properly, and why every good rider should learn how to trail brake. Everything you need to know about trail braking, with examples and exercise. Let's go! First of all, I'm going to try and sell you the whole idea of trail braking. Why should you bother to learn it in the first place? That's because trail braking can solve a lot of possible cornering problems for you. Knowing how to trail brake will massively improve your confidence in corners in general, but it will be especially useful in special case scenarios, like when you are going downhill on winding road, or when you are going through decreasing radius turn, or when you are going through the blind corner and suddenly see an obstacle. In all such cases, trail braking can be a very useful tool, which will make your riding much safer. And also, it can help you become faster in corners, if you choose so. But that, of course, is optional. Sales pitch is over. Now, what exactly is the trail braking and how is it different from simple braking mid-corner? Trail braking originates from racing as a way of improving lap times. So originally, trail braking is not so much a braking technique, but a fast cornering technique. And it is not exclusive for motorcycles, it is being used in car racing as well. As opposed to a more traditional method, where we do all our braking before the turn, then entering the turn and then accelerating as we see the exit, in trail braking we continue to brake as we enter in the turn, gradually releasing the brakes as we increase the lean angle. For track riding, this gives several advantages. We are not losing any time in transition phase, we are decelerating or accelerating the whole time. We can start our braking later. By gradually releasing the brakes as we lean more, we are making the weight transition from the front tire to the rear smoother. And by compressing our forks under braking, we make the wheelbase shorter and steering geometry steeper, which additionally help to lean a bit faster. Awesome! But there is one teeny tiny problem with it. It's difficult. Trying to manage precise amount of braking power as you lean your bike close to the edge of limit of traction for your tires requires a lot of skill and practice. Being a bit too greedy with the brake can easily lead to a low side. Fortunately, in the street riding, we usually are nowhere near the limit of traction. At least I hope so. So the trail braking for street riding gets a whole new meaning. It is no longer a way to take a corner as fast as you can. Now it is more a way to greatly improve safety. How it works on the road. Again, as opposed to classic slow look, press and roll method, we are keeping some pressure on the front brake as we lean our bike. But since we are not on a track now, and we don't need to lean to a maximum lean angle, we can keep some amount of brakes through the whole turn if we want. More so, we can modulate the amount of pressure on brakes as we see fit. If at any moment of the turn we need to slow down more, for example, if there is an obstacle mid-corner, we can gradually increase the pressure on brakes and our bike will slow down more. We can easily do it because we were pressing the front brake for the whole time, so we kept the front tire loaded and it had plenty of extra traction. That's the main advantage of trail braking over simple braking mid-corner. When we just brake mid-corner, we have to make the whole process. Release the throttle, gradually apply brakes, wait for the suspension to load, wait for the front tire to load properly, and only then apply a significant braking force. On common road bikes, without high-tech suspension and high-performance tires, it actually takes a significant amount of time. With trail braking, on the other hand, as we go through the corner, while already compressing the suspension and loading the front wheel, so we can apply the front brake much more efficiently. And we actually can apply surprisingly high amount of braking due to the nature of traction. It can be explained with a concept called the traction circle. As we all know, there is a maximal force in the contact patch of a tire which we can achieve. It is limited by two things: the load on the tire, and the coefficient of friction, which in turn depends on the tire compound, pavement quality, temperature, etc. This force can be spent to accelerate our wheel in any direction. We can open throttle and go forward, we can apply brakes and slow down, or we can lean our bike and turn left or right. Also, we can do any combination of all the above. We can turn and accelerate, or turn and brake at the same time, to a degree. All these possible actions form a circle, which is called a traction circle. Anything outside this circle will lead to a loss of traction. For example, if we brake too much or lean too much, we lose traction and lowside our bike. But anything inside this circle we can do. For example, we can lean 50% and brake 50% at the same time, and we'll be well inside the circle, so we'll have plenty of extra grip to spare. Just to have an idea of how much we can brake in the corner, if we lean about 70% of maximal lean angle, we still can apply roughly about 70% of braking force before we run out of traction. Of course, it's all for ideal conditions. In reality, we have to keep some safety margin, but it's still quite a lot. This possibility to apply a braking force mid-corner offers us a lot of options in case something goes wrong. For example, decreasing radius turns, which a lot of people are afraid of. If we are going through the turn and realize that it becomes tighter and tighter, we can add more braking and lose speed. And less speed means tighter turning radius, which is exactly what we need in this case. Next good example would be riding downhill on the winding road. A lot of people can feel a bit intimidated by that. With trail braking, riding downhill is not an issue. We can just add a little more braking, so our bike doesn't accelerate too much. And another case, which can be solved by trail braking, is an obstacles mid-corner. Because in street riding we are not leaning to the edge of traction, we still have a lot of traction left for braking. So we can even stop mid-corner completely if we need to. We can add more and more braking force as we bring our bike more and more vertical. In this case, we will not go wide, because as we are slowing down, our turning radius decreases. So slowing down and standing up cancel each other out, and we end up with constant curve. So as you can see, there is a lot of good stuff which we can do with trail braking. Now, how to learn it in a safe environment and hopefully without dropping your bike? There is only one way: practicing with gradually increasing difficulty. And don't worry, I'll give you the exercises which you will be able to practice almost anywhere, at any parking lot. You won't need a track. Let's start from the easiest exercise, which will give you some idea of the finesse you need with your front brake. And yes, by the way, for trail braking we mostly use the front brake, because when we brake, we load the front wheel and unload rear, so the front wheel has much more traction. And with our hand, we can control the front brake much better than we control rear with our foot in a motorcycle boot. Rear brake in trail braking on paved roads makes sense at slower speeds, like roughly below maybe 25–30 miles per hour, and it's mostly being used to smooth the jerking of the engine when we start to open the throttle. I have a separate video about it, I'll leave a link in the description. On higher speeds, the rear brake really doesn't matter much, but when used incorrectly, it can lead to a high side. Anyway, back to our exercise. To understand the amounts of braking which will operate, do this. Push your bike forward like this and start to apply the front brake very slowly. At some point, you'll feel the resistance of your front brake. This is about the minimal force which you will use for trail braking, and you should be able to control your brake with such amount of force. If you can't feel it and grab the brake a bit too much, chances are you're going to lowside your bike. Spend some time developing a fine feel for your front brake, just enough to feel the resistance of the brake. Then build yourself a 90-degree turn, which you can comfortably enter at roughly about 25 miles per hour. You can go faster if your parking lot is big enough, but around 25 miles per hour is usually enough. Now do this. As you approach the turn, do all the braking on the straight line like you normally do, but as you lean the bike, don't release the front brake completely. Leave that very small amount on the front brake, which you had in previous exercise, all the way through the turn, up until the moment you start rolling on the throttle. Repeat this several times, and as you become more and more confident, leave a bit more and more front brake. You even can keep the brake to slow down and stop your bike completely. Just don't forget to bring it to upright position. After you get comfortable with this exercise, do the same with 180-degree turn. Notice how here I hold the brake up until the point where my bike faces the exit of the turn. Only then I finally release it and start to open the throttle. Do the same thing. In this exercise you teach yourself to trail brake up until you see the exit. This way, later on the roads, you will never be surprised in a corner. You'll always be ready to slow down and stop if it's necessary. With this exercise you can experiment quite a lot, and eventually you'll find out that you indeed can leave quite a lot of brake, even on rather high lean angles. Just don't try to do everything right away. Take your time and learn gradually, don't push it. One more thing worth mentioning is when you start doing all this stuff on higher lean angles and with more brake pressure, you'll probably notice that your bike wants to stand up a little bit under braking. Don't worry, this is normal behavior. It happens because while in a corner, the contact patch of the front wheel is offset, and the braking force in it starts to turn the front wheel, producing the effect similar to counter steering, which makes the bikes to stand up. You'll not go wide though, because as we discussed earlier, even if your bike is standing up, it also slows down. So these two processes cancel each other and your line remains more or less intact. The important part here is when you feel your handlebars start to turn a little under braking, don't fight them too much, it's normal. You can apply some amount of pressure on them to make small corrections, but don't resist them too much, because on high lean angles and with a lot of braking you can low side pretty easily. With some practice you'll get used to it, but it's important that you practice in safe environment first, so you wouldn't, freak out, run off the road and fall from a cliff somewhere. Alright, I hope this video was useful. If you think so, put a like under it, so more people can watch it. And be sure to check out this video about braking techniques, because if you master the straight line braking, the trail braking should be much easier for you. Thank you for watching and have a nice day. Bye!